German Shepherd was found. Inside a dumpster full of boxes. What baby did, next left. Everyone in tears. The screaming started at exactly 7:43 p.m., but nobody heard it except a 5-year-old boy who wasn't supposed to be awake. What Ethan did in the next 60 seconds would save 7 lives and expose a criminal empire that had terrorized innocent animals for years. Before we begin this heartbreaking journey, hit that like button. Share with someone who loves animals, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Rain hammered against the apartment windows like desperate fingers tapping for help. Margaret sat in her worn recliner, her arthritic hands working steadily on a crossword puzzle, while her grandson Ethan pressed his small nose against the cold glass, watching the storm rage outside. The boy's breath fogged the window in small, perfect circles that expanded and disappeared like tiny ghosts. "Grammy, Max wants to go outside," Ethan said suddenly, turning to look at their golden retriever who was sleeping peacefully on his bed near the heater. "Sweetheart, Max is sound asleep," Margaret replied without looking up from her puzzle. "And nobody wants to go out in this weather." But Ethan's face remained serious, that particular expression Margaret had learned not to ignore completely. Ever since his parents died in that terrible accident 2 years ago, the boy had developed an unusual sensitivity to things others couldn't see or feel. The child psychologist had called it a coping mechanism, a way of processing grief. Margaret wasn't so sure anymore. "He says the storm washed something important to our street," Ethan insisted, his small hands pressed flat against the window. "Something that needs us." Thunder cracked overhead, making the lights flicker. Margaret sighed and set down her puzzle. At 68, with her pension barely covering their rent and groceries, she had enough real problems without indulging her grandson's imagination. But then she looked at his face, really looked at it, and saw something that made her pause. "What kind of something?" she asked carefully. Ethan's eyes, the same deep brown as his late mother's, grew wide. "Something crying." "Honey, that's just the wind." "No, Grammy." "Listen." Margaret was about to respond when Max suddenly lifted his head, ears perked forward, a low whine building in his throat. The old dog stood up, something he rarely did these days without good reason, and walked stiffly to the door. "See?" Ethan said, already pulling on his rain boots. "Max hears it too." Against her better judgment, Margaret found herself reaching for their raincoats. 5 minutes, she said firmly. "We check around the building, then come right back inside." The moment they stepped into the hallway, Ethan took off running toward the stairs, his yellow raincoat flapping behind him like wings. Margaret followed as quickly as her knees would allow, Max padding along beside her with surprising energy. Outside, the storm had transformed their familiar neighborhood into something alien and threatening. Streetlights created pools of orange light in the darkness, and the rain turned everything beyond into shifting shadows. Ethan stood at the building's entrance, his head tilted to one side, listening to something only he could hear. "This way," he said, pointing toward the grocery store parking lot across the street. "Ethan, no, that's too far." But the boy was already running, splashing through puddles with single-minded determination. Margaret had no choice but to follow, her heart pounding with more than just exertion. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to the night shift workers. Ethan headed straight for the back of the building, where the dumpsters stood in a row like sleeping giants. That's when Margaret heard it too. A sound so faint it could have been imagination, but it wasn't. It was real, and it was coming from inside one of the dumpsters. "Someone threw away a dog," Ethan said, his voice breaking with the kind of grief only children can express so purely. "Grammy, someone threw her away like garbage." Before Margaret could stop him, Ethan had dragged over a wooden crate and climbed up to peer inside the dumpster. What he saw made him gasp and nearly fall backward. "Grammy, help! She's dying!" The terror in his voice propelled Margaret forward despite her fear. She climbed onto the crate beside him and looked inside. What she saw would haunt her dreams for months to come. Buried under layers of soggy cardboard boxes was a German Shepherd, or what was left of one. The dog's ribs showed through patchy matted fur. Open wounds covered her body, some fresh and bleeding, others infected and festering. But worst of all was the chain, a heavy rusted chain that had been wrapped so tightly around her neck that it had embedded itself into her flesh, cutting deep grooves that oozed blood and pus. "Oh my God," Margaret whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The dog's eyes opened slightly at the sound of her voice. They were amber-colored, beautiful despite the pain clouding them, and in them Margaret saw not aggression or fear, but resignation. This animal had given up. She was waiting to die. "We have to get her out," Ethan said, already trying to climb into the dumpster. "No!" Margaret grabbed him, pulling him back. "She could be dangerous, honey. She's hurt and scared." "She's not dangerous," Ethan interrupted, his small face fierce with certainty. "She's sad. She's the saddest thing I've ever felt." Margaret looked at her grandson, then back at the dying dog. Every practical part of her screamed to call animal control, to let professionals handle this. They could barely afford to feed themselves and Max. Taking on a critically injured dog would be financial suicide. But then the dog whimpered, a sound so small and hopeless that it broke through every practical thought. "Stay here," she ordered Ethan. "Don't move." Margaret lowered herself carefully into the dumpster, her feet sinking into wet cardboard and garbage. The smell was overwhelming, but she pushed through it, moving slowly toward the dog. "Easy, girl," she whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog's eyes tracked her movement, but her body remained still. Margaret could see now that the animal couldn't move even if she wanted to. Her back legs were twisted at an unnatural angle, and every breath seemed to cause her pain. "Can you help me?" The voice startled Margaret so badly she nearly fell. A man stood at the edge of the dumpster, looking down at them with concern. He wore a grocery store uniform with a name tag that read, Carlos, Night Manager. "I heard voices back here," Carlos explained. "Is everything... Oh my God, is that a dog?" "She's dying," Ethan said simply. Someone hurt her really bad and threw her away. Carlos's face darkened with anger. "Who would do something like this?" He pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight to get a better look. The light revealed even more horror. Cigarette burns on the dog's legs, scars crisscrossing her entire body. "This is a fighting dog," Carlos said quietly. "Or was. Looks like a bait dog, actually. They use them to train the fighters." "What's a bait dog?" Ethan asked. Carlos glanced at Margaret, who shook her head slightly. "It means bad people hurt her," Carlos said carefully. "But we're going to help her now." "I can't lift her alone," Margaret said. "She's too big, and I don't want to hurt her more." Without hesitation, Carlos vaulted into the dumpster. Together, they carefully worked their arms under the dog's body. She whimpered once, but didn't struggle, as if she understood they were trying to help, or simply had no fight left in her. "On 3, Carlos said. 1, 2. They lifted together, the dog's body limp and frighteningly light despite her size. Ethan stood on the crate, his small arms outstretched to help guide them as they passed the dog up and over the edge. Once on solid ground, they could see the full extent of her condition. The chain around her neck had cut so deep it was nearly invisible beneath swollen, infected flesh. Her breathing was labored, each inhale a struggle. "She needs a vet," Margaret said, stating the obvious while her mind raced through their meager savings. "But we don't have..." "My brother," Carlos said suddenly. "Miguel. He's a veterinary assistant. He's not a full vet, but he helps at the emergency clinic. Let me call him." While Carlos made the call, Ethan knelt beside the dog, his small hand gently touching her head. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. I promise." The dog's eyes focused on the boy's face, and her tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, just a tiny movement. But it was enough to make Margaret's eyes fill with tears. "He's coming," Carlos announced. "He'll be here in 10 minutes. He's bringing supplies." Those 10 minutes felt like hours. Ethan never moved from the dog's side, whispering to her constantly, his voice seeming to calm her labored breathing. Margaret held an umbrella over them, trying to shield them from the rain that had softened to a drizzle. Max sat nearby, occasionally whining softly as if offering comfort. When Miguel arrived, he took one look at the dog and his face went pale. "Jesus," he muttered, then quickly looked at Ethan. "Sorry, this is bad, really bad." He knelt beside the animal, his hands moving professionally, despite the horror of what he was seeing. Severe malnutrition, multiple infected wounds, possible internal injuries, and he gently felt her abdomen. She's pregnant. Maybe 5 or 6 weeks. Pregnant? Margaret felt her heart sink even further. Not just one dying dog, but puppies too. "The chain has to come off immediately," Miguel said, pulling supplies from his bag. "It's cutting off blood flow and the infection is spreading. But I need to sedate her first." "Will she survive?" Ethan asked, his voice small but steady. Miguel hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I don't know, buddy. She's in really bad shape, but we're going to try." As Miguel prepared the sedation, he explained what he was doing to Ethan, who listened with intense focus. "This will help her not feel pain while I work on her neck," he said, finding a vein despite the dog's dehydration. The moment the needle went in, the dog's eyes found Ethan's face again, as if drawing strength from his presence. Slowly, her body relaxed as the medication took effect. "What's her name?" Miguel asked as he began the delicate process of cutting away the chain. "Hope," Ethan said without hesitation. "Her name is Hope." Margaret wanted to protest that they couldn't name her, couldn't get attached, but the words died in her throat. The name was perfect, and already she knew there was no going back. The process of removing the chain was gruesome. Miguel had to cut it in several places, carefully peeling it away from flesh that had begun to grow around it. Blood flowed freely, and the smell of infection was overwhelming, but he worked steadily, cleaning and treating each wound as he went. "This chain has been on her for months," he said grimly. "Maybe longer. The scarring suggests she's been fighting for at least a year, probably more." "Fighting?" Margaret asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Dog fighting rings," Carlos said quietly. "They're illegal, but they're everywhere. Big money in it." He looked at Hope with disgust. "When a dog won't fight or gets too injured, they usually just kill them. She must have escaped somehow. Or someone dumped her when she got pregnant," Miguel added. "Fighting dogs that get pregnant are useless to them." Ethan had been quiet during this exchange, but suddenly he spoke up. "She didn't escape. Someone brought her here." The adults exchanged glances. "What makes you say that, honey?" Margaret asked. "Because she told me," Ethan said simply. "Not with words, but I can see it. A man with a snake tattoo on his neck. He drove a white van. He was angry because she wouldn't fight anymore, and when he found out about the puppies, he—" The boy's voice trailed off, his face troubled. "Ethan," Margaret started, but Carlos interrupted her. "Wait," he said urgently. "A snake tattoo on his neck? White van?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly through something. "Was it this man?" He showed them a fuzzy security camera image from the store's parking lot, dated just 3 hours earlier. A white van was parked near the dumpsters, and though the image was grainy, a man was visible carrying something large toward the dumpsters. Ethan looked at the image and nodded. "That's him. That's the bad man who hurt Hope." Carlos's face was grim. "I'm calling the police. This is evidence of animal cruelty, and if this guy is running fighting rings—" While Carlos made the call, Miguel finished treating Hope's immediate wounds. "She needs intensive care," he said to Margaret. "IV fluids, antibiotics, monitoring. I can do some of it, but she really needs a proper vet clinic." "How much?" Margaret asked, though she already knew it would be more than they had. "Thousands," Miguel said honestly. "Maybe more with the pregnancy." Margaret felt tears sting her eyes. They had barely $800 in savings, money she'd scraped together for emergencies. But what kind of emergency was more important than this? "We'll figure it out," she heard herself saying. "Can you at least stabilize her tonight?" Miguel nodded. "I'll do everything I can. My apartment is close. We can take her there, and I'll stay up with her." "No," Ethan said firmly. "She needs to come home with us. She's scared of being alone. She thinks if we leave her, we won't come back." Margaret wanted to argue, but the certainty in Ethan's voice stopped her. Besides, how could she explain to a 5-year-old that they couldn't afford to save the dog he'd already named and claimed? "I'll come to your place," Miguel offered. "I'll bring everything I can. Carlos, can you help me carry her?" The journey back to their apartment was surreal. Carlos and Miguel carried Hope on a makeshift stretcher made from a tarp, while Margaret led the way with Ethan and Max. Several neighbors peered out their windows at the strange procession, but no one came out in the rain to investigate. Inside their small apartment, they laid Hope on a pile of old blankets near the heater. Miguel set up an IV line, hanging the bag from a floor lamp. The dog's breathing was still labored, but seemed less desperate. "The puppies?" Margaret asked quietly while Ethan was in the bathroom washing his hands. Still alive for now, Miguel said, but if she doesn't stabilize soon... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Ethan returned and immediately settled beside Hope, his small hand resting gently on her side, carefully avoiding her wounds. "It's okay," he whispered to her. "You're home now." "I'll stay for a few hours," Miguel offered, "to monitor her and give her the next round of medications." "I can't ask you to," Margaret began. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Miguel's eyes were kind. "Besides, Carlos is already setting up a GoFundMe. He took some pictures. With your permission, of course. People need to know about this." Margaret nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. In the span of 2 hours, their quiet life had been turned upside down. She looked at Ethan, curled protectively around Hope, and wondered what she had gotten them into. "Grammy," Ethan said softly, "Hope wants to know if she can stay forever." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Margaret thought about their tiny apartment, their stretched budget, the impossibility of it all. Then she looked at Hope's eyes, those amber eyes that held so much pain, but also, somehow, still held trust. "Let's just focus on tonight," she said finally, "one day at a time." But even as she said it, she knew the truth. Hope was already theirs, and they were already hers. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Miguel administered another dose of antibiotics and pain medication, then showed Margaret how to monitor Hope's breathing and heart rate. "If anything changes, call me immediately," he said, leaving several numbers. "I mean it, anytime, day or night." After Miguel and Carlos left, the apartment fell into an exhausted quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving only the occasional drip from the gutters. Ethan had fallen asleep beside Hope, his arm draped protectively over her side. Max had positioned himself at Hope's head, occasionally licking her muzzle gently. Margaret sat in her chair, watching them all. The practical part of her mind was screaming about vet bills, about space, about the sheer impossibility of caring for a critically injured pregnant dog. But another part, a part she thought had died with her daughter, was stirring to life. Hope whimpered in her sleep, and immediately Ethan's eyes opened. "It's okay," he murmured, still half asleep. "The bad dreams will go away. I promise." The dog settled, her breathing evening out. Margaret found herself wondering, not for the first time, about Ethan's unusual connection with animals. Even before his parents died, he'd always seemed to understand what they were feeling, but with Hope, it was different, stronger, as if their broken hearts recognized each other. Her phone buzzed. Carlos had sent her a link to the GoFundMe page. The title read, "5-year-old boy saves pregnant dog from dumpster. Help Hope survive." Already, in just an hour, they had raised $300. Margaret read some of the comments through tears. "No animal deserves this." Donation sent. "That little boy is an angel. Please keep us updated on Hope's progress. Whoever did this should rot in jail." Her phone rang, startling her. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Mrs. Chen?" The voice was female, professional. "This is Officer Diana Chen with the City Police Department. I understand you found an abused dog this evening." "Yes, we did. Carlos at the grocery store said he called." "He did, and he sent us security footage. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you some questions about what you found. This might be connected to a case we've been building." Margaret's blood ran cold. "What kind of case? I can't discuss details over the phone, but I'd like to come by tomorrow morning if that's okay." "We've been tracking an illegal dog fighting ring for months. The man in that security footage, we've been looking for him." After Margaret agreed to the meeting and hung up, she found herself staring at Hope with new understanding. This wasn't just about saving one dog anymore. They had stumbled into something much bigger, much more dangerous. "Grammy?" Ethan's voice was small in the darkness. "Are you scared?" Margaret moved to sit on the floor beside him. "A little," she admitted. "Are you?" Ethan shook his head. "Hope says we're her angels. She says she knew we would come. She held on because she knew someone would hear her." "How could she know that?" Ethan looked at her with those old soul eyes that reminded her so much of his mother. "The same way I knew to go outside tonight. Sometimes you just know things." Margaret pulled him close, careful not to disturb Hope. "You did a brave thing tonight, sweetheart. "It wasn't brave," Ethan said simply. "It was just the right thing. That's what Mommy would say, isn't it? That we should always do the right thing, even when it's hard?" Margaret's throat tightened. "Yes, baby. That's exactly what she would say." They sat in silence for a while, listening to Hope's breathing, which seemed stronger now. The fourth drip continued its steady rhythm. Outside, the city was quiet, the storm having washed the streets clean. "Grammy," Ethan said again. "Yes, Hope's puppies are going to be okay. I can feel them. They're fighters, just like their mom, but the good kind of fighters, the kind that fight to live, not to hurt." Margaret didn't question how he could possibly know this. After tonight, she was beginning to believe that some things didn't need logical explanation. Around 3 a.m, Hope woke up, her eyes clearer than before. She tried to lift her head, whimpering softly. Ethan immediately woke up, his hands gentle as he helped support her head. "She's thirsty," he announced. Margaret fetched a bowl of water, and together they helped Hope drink, just a few laps before she exhausted herself. But it was progress. The dog's eyes moved between them, as if memorizing their faces. "See?" Ethan whispered to her. "I told you we wouldn't leave. We're your family now?" Hope's tail moved slightly, the closest thing to a wag she could manage. Then she did something that made Margaret gasp. She licked Ethan's hand just once before laying her head back down. "She says thank you," Ethan translated, though Margaret thought she understood without words. Miguel returned at dawn, looking exhausted but determined. He checked Hope's vitals, changed her IV bag, and examined her wounds. "She's stable," he announced with visible relief. "Not out of the woods, but stable. Her temperature is better, and the puppies still have heartbeats." "All of them?" Ethan asked anxiously. Miguel nodded. "All 5 or 6 as far as I can tell. Your dog is tougher than she looks." "She had to be," Ethan said solemnly. She was protecting her babies. As the morning sun filled the apartment, Margaret's phone began ringing constantly. The GoFundMe had been shared hundreds of times overnight, raising over $2,000. Local news stations wanted interviews. A veterinary clinic had offered discounted services. The community was rallying around Hope's story. But Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was coming. The man with the snake tattoo was still out there. He knew where he'd dumped Hope. What if he came back to make sure she was dead? She looked at Ethan, who was carefully brushing the parts of Hope's fur that weren't wounded, talking to her softly about everything and nothing. Her grandson had already lost so much. She couldn't let him lose hope, too. Officer Diana Chen arrived promptly at 9, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She took photos of Hope's injuries, documented the chain marks, and listened carefully as Ethan described what he'd understood from Hope about her past. "The snake tattoo is significant," Officer Chen said. "We've been tracking someone matching that description, Vincent Russo. He runs one of the largest fighting rings in the state, but we've never been able to prove it." "You think Hope belonged to him?" Margaret asked. "The timing fits. We raided one of his suspected locations 2 weeks ago, but it had been cleared out. Several dogs were unaccounted for." Officer Chen looked at Hope with sympathy. "Bait dogs are often killed when an operation shuts down. They're evidence." "But Hope was pregnant," Margaret pointed out, "which might be why she was dumped instead of killed. Russo probably figured she'd die on her own, no evidence linking back to him." Officer Chen's expression darkened. He didn't count on someone finding her in time. "Are we in danger?" Margaret asked quietly, glancing at Ethan. Officer Chen hesitated. "I don't want to alarm you, but Russo has been known to retrieve dogs that get away, especially pregnant ones. The puppies from fighting bloodlines are valuable." Margaret felt sick. "What should we do?" "For now, don't advertise your address anywhere. Keep the dog inside, and call me immediately if you see anything suspicious." She handed Margaret a card. "Anything at all?" After the officer left, Margaret found herself pacing the small apartment. The walls that had always felt cozy now felt constraining, vulnerable. She watched Ethan with hope, saw how the dog's eyes, followed the boy everywhere he went, and made a decision. "We're going to save her," she said out loud, as much to convince herself as to reassure Ethan. "Whatever it takes, we're going to save her and her puppies." Ethan looked up at her with a smile that broke her heart with its pure trust. "I know, Grammy. Hope knows too. She's not giving up, and neither are we. The next few days blurred together in a routine of medications, wound care, and careful feeding. Hope grew stronger incrementally, able to hold her head up longer, drinking more water, even eating small amounts of soft food from Ethan's hand. The boy never left her side, except for bathroom breaks, reading to her from his picture books, telling her stories about the life waiting for her when she was better. Miguel came twice a day to check on her, each time amazed by her progress. Medically speaking, she shouldn't be recovering this fast, he told Margaret. It's like she has something to live for now. She does, Ethan said simply. Us and her babies. The GoFundMe continued to grow, reaching $5,000 by the third day. People sent dog food, blankets, toys for the future puppies. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, but Margaret couldn't shake her anxiety. Every car that drove slowly past their building made her heart race. Every unexpected knock at the door sent her into panic mode. On the fourth night, her fears materialized. Ethan woke her up, his small body trembling. "Grammy, Hope is scared. Someone's outside." Margaret listened, hearing nothing at first. Then, faintly, footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps that stopped right outside their door. Her blood turned to ice. The doorknob rattled. Hope, despite her weakness, began to growl, a low warning sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. Max joined her, the usually gentle golden retriever standing with his hackles raised. Margaret grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed Officer Chen's number. It rang once, twice. The rattling stopped. The footsteps moved away, faster now, running. "They're checking all the apartments," Ethan whispered, "looking for Hope. She can smell him. It's the Snake Man." Officer Chen answered on the fourth ring. "Mrs. Chen, someone was just at our door," Margaret whispered urgently, "trying to get in. I'm sending units now. Lock yourself in the bathroom with Ethan and the dogs. Don't come out until you hear my voice." They huddled in the small bathroom, Hope lying across the doorway like a guardian despite her injuries. Max pressed against Ethan's side. Margaret held a baseball bat she'd grabbed from the closet, though she didn't know what good it would do against the kind of men who ran dog-fighting rings. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours before Officer Chen's voice called through the door. "Mrs. Chen, it's safe. You can come out." The officer's face was grim. "We found fresh scratches on your lock. Someone definitely tried to get in. We're posting an officer outside for the night, but..." She paused, looking at Hope, then at Ethan. "This isn't over. Russo knows she's somewhere in this building." "What are you saying?" Margaret asked, though she already knew. "You need to relocate, temporarily, until we can arrest Russo. I know it's a lot to ask." "Where?" Margaret interrupted. "We don't have anywhere to go. No family, no..." "I might have a solution," Officer Chen said. "My cousin runs a ranch about an hour outside the city. It's isolated, secure. She rehabilitates horses, so she's used to caring for injured animals. You could stay there while Hope recovers and has her puppies." Margaret looked at Ethan, who was whispering something to Hope, his small hands gentle on her head. The dog's tail wagged slightly despite everything. "Hope says yes," Ethan announced. "She says the puppies would like to be born somewhere safe." Officer Chen raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on the boy's claim. "I can arrange transport tomorrow morning, unmarked vehicle. We'll make sure you're not followed." That night, none of them slept. Margaret packed their essentials while Ethan stayed with Hope, telling her about the ranch, about the space she'd have to run when she was better, about how her puppies would grow up free and happy. "No more chains," he whispered to her. "No more fighting. Just love." Hope's amber eyes watched him with an intensity that seemed almost human. Her tail thumped once against the floor, a promise and a thank you all at once. As dawn broke through their apartment windows, Margaret realized their lives had irrevocably changed. What had started as a desperate rescue in a storm had become something larger. A fight against cruelty, a stand for innocence, a testament to the power of compassion. She looked at her grandson, this remarkable little boy who heard the cries others ignored, who saw the soul inside a broken body, who loved without condition or reservation. He had lost his parents, but perhaps in saving Hope, he was saving himself too. The morning sun painted Hope's fur golden, where it wasn't scarred, and for the first time, Margaret could see the beautiful dog she would become. The journey ahead would be difficult. The ranch, the puppies, the ongoing threat from Russo, the mountain of medical bills despite the donations. But looking at Ethan and Hope together, she knew they had already won the most important battle. They had chosen love over fear, compassion over convenience, and in doing so, they had given Hope exactly what her name promised, a future worth fighting for. Miguel arrived early to prepare Hope for transport, checking her vitals one more time and adjusting her pain medication for the journey. "She's strong enough to travel," he assured them. "Just keep her calm and comfortable." "She knows we're keeping her safe," Ethan said confidently. "She trusts us." As they prepared to leave their apartment, possibly forever if Russo wasn't caught, Margaret took one last look around. This small space had been their refuge after losing Ethan's parents, their cocoon of grief and healing. Now they were leaving it to protect a dog they had known for less than a week. It should have felt insane. Instead, it felt like destiny. "Ready?" Officer Chen asked from the doorway. Margaret looked at Ethan, who nodded solemnly. Hope, despite her weakness, tried to stand, as if she too was ready for whatever came next. "We're ready," Margaret said, and meant it. They carried Hope down to the waiting van on the stretcher, Ethan never letting go of her paw. Max followed, his tail low, but his step determined. As they drove away from the only home Ethan had known since his parents died, Margaret expected tears, resistance, fear. Instead, her grandson was calm, focused entirely on Hope. "She says thank you," he said suddenly, "for not giving up on her." Margaret reached over and squeezed his small shoulder. "We never will," she promised. The city faded behind them as they drove toward an uncertain future. But Hope's breathing was steady, her puppies were still moving inside her, and Ethan's faith never wavered. Sometimes, Margaret thought, the most important journeys begin with a single act of compassion on a stormy night. The ranch appeared like something from a dream after an hour of winding country roads. White fences stretched across rolling hills, and horses grazed peacefully in the morning sun. The main house was modest but welcoming, with a wraparound porch and flower boxes at every window. Officer Chen's cousin, Linda, met them at the gate. She was a tall woman with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes that immediately went to Hope. "Oh, sweet girl," she said softly. "What did they do to you?" "Bad people hurt her," Ethan said solemnly. "But she's going to be okay now." Linda smiled at him. "I believe you're right, young man. Let's get her settled." They had prepared a stall in the barn, clean and warm, with fresh straw and soft blankets. It was bigger than Margaret's entire apartment, with a window that looked out over the pasture. Hope seemed to relax the moment they laid her down, as if she could sense the peace of this place. "The vet will come this afternoon," Linda said. "Full examination, ultrasound for the puppies. Whatever she needs." "We have money from the fundraiser," Margaret began. Linda waved her off. "We'll figure that out later. Right now, let's just focus on getting her well." The barn smelled of fresh hay and old wood, a combination that seemed to calm Hope's labored breathing within minutes of their arrival. Ethan hadn't left her side, his small hands working gently through her matted fur, while whispering promises only she could hear. Margaret watched from the doorway as Linda brought in supplies, more blankets, water bowls, and a special cushioned bed designed for pregnant dogs. "She's beautiful under all those scars," Linda said softly, kneeling beside Hope. "German shepherds are fighters, but the good kind. The kind that protect, not destroy." Hope's amber eyes tracked Linda's movements, wary but not aggressive. When the older woman extended her hand slowly, Hope sniffed it once, then laid her head back down with a deep sigh that seemed to release weeks of tension. "Grammy, look," Ethan said suddenly, his voice filled with wonder. "Her puppies are moving." Sure enough, Hope's swollen belly showed visible movement, little bumps and shifts as the unborn puppies adjusted positions. The sight made Margaret's throat tight with emotion, life persisting despite everything, innocence growing in a body that had known such cruelty. Dr. Sarah Martinez arrived that afternoon, a mobile vet who specialized in rescue cases. She was younger than Margaret expected, with gentle hands and an immediate rapport with Hope that seemed to transcend the usual veterinarian-patient relationship. "Let's see what we're working with," she said, setting up a portable ultrasound machine. "Ethan, would you like to help? I could use an assistant who speaks dog. Ethan's face lit up for the first time in days. Hope says she's nervous, but she knows you're helping. Dr. Martinez smiled without a trace of condescension. Tell her we'll be very gentle and she'll get to see her babies on this screen. The ultrasound revealed 6 puppies, all with strong heartbeats despite their mother's ordeal. This is remarkable, Doctor, Martinez said, moving the wand carefully over Hope's belly. Given the malnutrition and trauma, I would have expected, well, this is nothing short of miraculous. They wanted to live, Ethan said simply, just like their mama. Dr. Martinez examined Hope's healing wounds, particularly the deep grooves where the chain had been embedded. Miguel did excellent emergency work, she said, but she'll need surgery eventually to repair some of this damage. The scarring will be significant. She doesn't care about scars, Ethan said firmly. She just wants her babies to be safe. That evening, as the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Margaret found herself sitting in the barn with Hope while Ethan helped Linda feed the horses. The dog's breathing was easier now, the IV fluids and consistent medication finally taking effect. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Margaret said softly to Hope. Both of us trying to protect our babies in a world that hasn't been very kind. Hope's tail thumped once against the straw. Margaret's phone buzzed with a text from Officer Chen. Russo's getting desperate. He's been asking around about the dog. Stay alert. A chill ran down Margaret's spine. Even here, an hour from the city, they weren't truly safe. She looked at Hope, at her distended belly full of innocent life, and felt a fierce protectiveness she hadn't experienced since Ethan's mother was small. That night, Ethan insisted on sleeping in the barn with Hope. Linda brought out a camping cot and sleeping bag, setting them up right beside the dog's bed. She has nightmares, Ethan explained, about the fighting place, about her puppies being taken away. I need to be here when she wakes up scared. Margaret wanted to protest, to insist he sleep in the comfortable guest room Linda had prepared, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't a child's whim. This was a soul-deep need to protect and comfort. Around midnight, Margaret woke to the sound of her phone ringing. Officer Chen's name lit up the screen. We have a problem, the officer said without preamble. Russo knows about the GoFundMe. He's seen the pictures. He knows Hope survived. Margaret's blood ran cold. How? Someone in his network recognized her. She was apparently quite famous in the fighting circuit. A bait dog who survived longer than any other. They called her the Ghost because she should have died a dozen times over. What does this mean for us? It means he'll be looking harder. The ranch is still safe. He doesn't know where you are. But Margaret, there's something else. We found records at one of his properties. Hope wasn't just any bait dog. She was bred from champion lines, stolen as a puppy. Her puppies could be worth tens of thousands on the black market. Margaret felt sick. He'll never stop looking for her. Not unless we stop him first. I'm working on something, a plan to draw him out. But I need your help. Specifically, I need Ethan's help. Absolutely not, Margaret said immediately. I won't put my grandson in danger. Not physical danger, Officer Chen assured her. But Ethan seems to have a connection with Hope, knows things about her past. If he could provide more details about what he's seen or felt from her, it might give us what we need to build a solid case. Margaret looked out the window toward the barn, where her grandson slept beside a broken dog, 2 damaged souls healing each other. I'll think about it, she said finally. The next morning brought a new crisis. Hope had developed a fever during the night, her body finally succumbing to the accumulated stress and infection. Dr. Martinez arrived within an hour of Ethan's panicked call, her face grave as she examined the dog. The puppies are stressing her system, she explained. Her body is trying to heal itself while also supporting 6 growing lives. We might need to consider... No, Ethan interrupted, his small face fierce. We're not giving up on the puppies. Hope won't let them die. She promised them. Dr. Martinez exchanged glances with Margaret. Ethan, sometimes we have to make hard choices. Hope already made her choice, Ethan said firmly. She chose to keep them alive even when she was dying in that dumpster. We can't take that away from her now. The vet adjusted Hope's medications, adding stronger antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. We'll try this for 24 hours, she said. But if her fever doesn't break... She didn't need to finish. They all understood what would have to happen. Ethan didn't leave Hope's side for the entire day. He kept cold compresses on her head, dribbled water into her mouth with a syringe, and talked to her constantly. Margaret brought his meals to the barn, watching as he shared tiny pieces of his sandwich with Hope, coaxing her to eat. "She says the puppies are talking to her," Ethan said that afternoon. "They're telling her to be strong, that they need her." Linda, who had been skeptical of Ethan's claims at first, found herself believing. "I've seen a lot of animals in my years here," she told Margaret, "but I've never seen anything like the bond between that boy and that dog." That evening, Carlos called with news that the GoFundMe had reached $10,000. "People are invested in Hope's story," he said. "The local news wants to do a feature. Maybe the attention will help protect you, make it too public for Russo to make a move." Margaret was torn. Publicity might protect them, but it might also make them easier to find. She decided to wait to see if Hope's fever broke before making any decisions about media attention. That night, Ethan refused to sleep. He sat beside Hope, his small hand on her side, feeling every labored breath. Around 2 a.m, he suddenly called out, "Grammy!" "Something's happening." Margaret and Linda rushed to the barn to find Hope struggling to stand, her body trembling with effort. "She needs to go outside," Ethan said urgently, "right now." They helped Hope to her feet, supporting her weight as she stumbled toward the barn door. The moment she stepped outside into the cool night air, she lifted her head to the sky and howled, a long, mournful sound that seemed to carry all her pain and fear and hope across the darkness. From somewhere in the distance, another howl answered, then another. The ranch's own dogs, the neighbors' dogs miles away, all responding to Hope's call. "She's calling for help," Ethan whispered. "She's telling them she needs strength for her babies." Whether it was coincidence or something more, Hope's fever broke within the hour. By dawn, she was drinking water on her own, her eyes clearer than they had been since the rescue. Dr. Martinez, arriving for the morning check, was astounded. "I don't have a medical explanation for this," she admitted. "By all rights, she should have gone into septic shock." "Love," Ethan said simply. "Love is stronger than medicine sometimes." The vet smiled and ruffled his hair. "You might be right about that, young man." But their relief was short-lived. That afternoon, Linda noticed a car parked on the road overlooking the ranch, just sitting there with the engine running. When she walked toward it, it sped off, but not before she caught a glimpse of the driver, a man with what looked like a tattoo on his neck. "They found us," Margaret said, fear making her voice tight. Officer Chen arrived within the hour with 2 other officers. "We're moving you," she said, "tonight, but this time we're going to use it to our advantage." She explained the plan. They would make it seem like Hope was being transported to a veterinary hospital in the city for emergency surgery. The route would be leaked to Russo's network, but Hope wouldn't actually be in the vehicle. It would be a decoy. "Where will we really go?" Margaret asked. "Nowhere. You'll stay right here, but hidden. We're betting Russo will personally come for what he thinks is Hope being transported. When he makes his move, we'll have him." "It's dangerous," Linda said. "Using her property as bait. Hope wants to do it," Ethan interrupted. Everyone turned to look at him. "She wants to stop him so he can't hurt any more dogs. She's not afraid anymore. She has us." Officer Chen studied the boy for a long moment. "Ethan, I need to ask you some questions about what Hope has shown you. About the fighting ring, about Russo. Can you do that?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Hope says she'll tell me everything if it helps stop him." For the next hour, Ethan described in chilling detail what he claimed Hope had revealed to him. The warehouse with the red door and broken windows, the smell of motor oil and blood, the sound of Russo's voice, high and sharp when he was angry, the names he heard the men call each other, the other dogs who didn't survive. Officer Chen recorded everything, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. "This matches what we've suspected but couldn't prove," she said. "Ethan, are you sure about the location, the red door?" "Hope remembers everything," Ethan said quietly. She had to. She thought someday someone would save her and she could tell them. She memorized it all. That night, they prepared for the sting operation. A van matching the description of a veterinary transport vehicle was brought to the ranch. Officers were positioned throughout the property, hidden but ready. Hope was moved to a concealed room in Linda's house, along with Margaret and Ethan. "Whatever happens," Officer Chen told them, "don't come out until I give you the all clear." no matter what you hear. The hours passed slowly. Hope seemed to sense the tension, her body restless despite her weakness. The puppies were active too, moving constantly in her belly as if they could feel their mother's anxiety. "Soon," Ethan whispered to Hope, "soon you'll be free forever." At exactly 10 p.m., the decoy van left the ranch, driving slowly down the country road toward the city. Margaret watched from a crack in the curtains as its taillights disappeared into the darkness. 20 minutes later, Officer Chen's voice crackled over the radio. They took the bait. 3 vehicles following the van. Another 20 minutes. "Russo's definitely in one of them. We've confirmed visual." Then, just as Margaret was starting to relax, thinking the plan was working, Ethan suddenly grabbed her arm. "Grammy, Hope says something's wrong. There are people here, at the ranch." Before Margaret could respond, they heard it, the sound of breaking glass from the barn. "They split up," Margaret whispered in horror. "Some followed the van, but others came here." She grabbed her phone to call Officer Chen, but there was no signal. The landline was dead too. "They cut the lines," Linda said, her face pale but determined. She pulled a shotgun from a cabinet. "Nobody's taken that dog. Not from my property." "Linda, no," Margaret protested. "These are dangerous men. And I'm a Texas woman who doesn't take kindly to trespassers," Linda said firmly. "You all stay here. Lock the door behind me." But before she could leave, they heard footsteps on the porch. Multiple sets of footsteps. They were surrounded. Hope struggled to stand, a low growl building in her throat despite her weakness. Even barely able to walk, she positioned herself between Ethan and the door. "It's okay, Hope," Ethan said, but his voice trembled. "The police will come. Officer Chen will know something's wrong." The doorknob rattled, then harder. Someone was trying to force it open. Margaret pulled Ethan behind the couch, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. This couldn't be happening. After everything they'd been through, they couldn't lose hope now. The door splintered with a crack that made them all jump. A man stepped through. Not Russo, but someone just as frightening. Tall, muscled, with cold eyes that immediately found Hope. "There she is," he said with satisfaction. "The ghost. Boss is going to be real happy." "You're not taking her," Ethan said, stepping out from behind the couch before Margaret could stop him. His small body trembled, but his voice was strong. "She's not yours anymore." The man laughed an ugly sound. "Kid, you don't know what you're messing with. That dog is worth more than this whole ranch. Her puppies are already sold." "They're not things to sell," Ethan said, moving to stand beside Hope. "They're living beings who feel pain and fear and love. Get out of the way, kid, or—" Whatever threat he was about to make was cut short by the sound of sirens. Many sirens, getting closer fast. The man's face changed from confident to panicked. "Grab the dog!" he shouted to someone outside. "Now!" 2 more men rushed in, heading straight for Hope. But they hadn't counted on the dog herself. Despite her injuries, despite her pregnancy, despite everything she'd been through, Hope found strength from somewhere deep inside. She lunged at the first man, her teeth finding his arm with precision born from years of forced fighting. He screamed, falling backward. The second man reached for her, but Max, sweet old Max, who had followed them from the city, suddenly appeared, biting the man's leg with surprising ferocity. "Leave them alone!" Ethan screamed, throwing himself over Hope as she collapsed from the effort, her body trembling with exhaustion. The sirens were right outside now. Police voices shouted commands. The men tried to run, but found the house surrounded by officers who had been racing back from the decoy operation. "Nobody move!" Officer Chen's voice commanded as she entered, weapon drawn. "You're all under arrest." The man Hope had bitten was on the floor, clutching his bleeding arm. "That dog attacked me," he protested. "I want it put down." "That dog was defending herself and her family from intruders," Officer Chen said coldly. "You're lucky she didn't do worse." As the men were handcuffed and led away, Officer Chen knelt beside Hope, who was panting heavily, her strength completely spent. "Is she okay?" she asked Ethan, who had his arms wrapped protectively around the dog's neck. "She's tired," Ethan said, tears streaming down his face. "But she's proud. She protected us." Dr. Martinez arrived within minutes, having been on standby for the operation. She quickly examined Hope, her face tense with concern. "The stress triggered labor," she announced. "She's going into delivery, but she's too weak. We need to get her stable first." They worked through the night, Doctor, Martinez and her assistant managing Hope's labor while Ethan refused to leave her side. Margaret held cold compresses and handed over supplies, while Linda kept everyone supplied with coffee and quiet prayers. The first puppy arrived just as the sun began to rise, tiny and perfect despite everything. Ethan helped clean it, his small hands infinitely gentle as he placed the puppy near Hope's head so she could see what she'd fought so hard to protect. "You did it," he whispered to Hope. "You kept your promise." 5 more puppies followed over the next 2 hours. 3 were strong and healthy, nursing immediately. 2 were smaller, weaker, struggling to breathe. Dr. Martinez worked on them frantically, clearing their airways, stimulating their bodies to fight. "Come on, little ones," she muttered. "Your mama didn't survive everything just to lose you now." Ethan placed his hands on the smallest puppy, the runt who wasn't moving at all. He closed his eyes, and Margaret could have sworn she saw something pass between the boy and the tiny creature, some invisible transfer of will or energy or love. The puppy gasped, then cried, a thin, reedy sound that was the most beautiful thing Margaret had ever heard. "That's 6, Doctor," Martinez said, exhausted but smiling. 6 living puppies. It's a miracle. Hope, despite her exhaustion, insisted on checking each puppy, licking them clean, nudging them toward her belly to nurse. Her eyes, those amber eyes that had seen such horror, now glowed with fierce maternal love. "She says thank you," Ethan told everyone in the room. "She says her puppies will never know chains or fighting. They'll only know love." Officer Chen returned that afternoon with news that made everyone celebrate. "We got him," she announced. "Vincent Russo. The men we arrested here gave him up to save themselves. Combined with the evidence from the warehouse Ethan described, we have enough to put him away for years." "What about the other dogs?" Ethan asked immediately. "The ones still in the fighting ring?" "All rescued," Officer Chen assured him. 43 dogs, all alive, all going to be rehabilitated. Hope's survival led us to save them all. The media attention that followed was overwhelming. The story of the 5-year-old boy who saved a pregnant bait dog went viral worldwide. Donations poured in. Not just money, but offers of homes for the puppies, veterinary care for Hope, and support for Margaret and Ethan. But through it all, Ethan's focus never wavered from Hope and her puppies. He named each one: courage, faith, joy, peace, strength, and miracle, the runt who'd almost died. He spent hours with them, and somehow always knew which puppy needed extra attention, which one was hungry, which one was scared. "He's got a gift, Doctor," Martinez told Margaret one day, watching Ethan work with the puppies. "I've never seen anything like it. He should think about becoming a veterinarian when he grows up." "He says he wants to open a place for dogs like Hope," Margaret replied. "Dogs that nobody else wants. He wants to teach them that humans can be kind." 6 weeks passed. Hope's wounds healed, leaving scars but no lasting damage. She gained weight, her coat grew glossy, and her eyes lost that haunted look. The puppies grew fat and playful, tumbling over each other in the barn that had become their nursery. The day came when Dr. Martinez declared the puppies old enough to be adopted. Families had been carefully screened, Officer Chen personally running background checks on anyone who wanted one of Hope's puppies. But when the first family arrived to take Courage home, Ethan had a meltdown. "They're not ready," he cried, throwing his arms around the puppy. "Hope isn't ready to say goodbye." Margaret knelt beside him. "Sweetheart, we talked about this. The puppies need their own homes. We can't keep them all." "But Hope will be sad," Ethan sobbed. "She fought so hard to keep them safe, and now we're taking them away." It was Hope herself who solved the problem. She picked up Courage gently in her mouth and carried him to the waiting family, placing him in the little girl's arms. Then she licked the puppy once, as if saying goodbye, and walked back to Ethan. "She says it's okay," Ethan said through his tears. "She says she kept them safe long enough. Now it's time for them to make other families happy." One by one, over the next week, the puppies went to their new homes. Each family promised to stay in touch, to send pictures and updates. Faith went to a retired veteran who needed a companion. Joy went to a family with 3 children who had been waiting years for the right dog. Peace went to a therapy dog program. Strength went to a farmer who needed a working dog. But when it came time for Miracle, the runt, to leave, Ethan looked at Margaret with pleading eyes. "Can't we keep just one?" he asked. "Miracle wants to stay with Hope. And with us." Margaret looked at the smallest puppy, the one who'd almost died, the one Ethan had somehow brought back to life with his touch. Then she looked at Hope, who was watching her with those knowing amber eyes. "I suppose one puppy won't be too much trouble," she said, and Ethan threw his arms around her with a joy that made every struggle worth it. The ranch became their permanent home. Linda, who had grown to love them like family, offered them the small cottage on her property. "Hope needs space to run," she said, "and Ethan needs room to grow up with his dogs." The GoFundMe money, which had eventually reached $50,000, paid for Hope's ongoing medical care and set up a fund for other rescue dogs. Ethan's story inspired legislation against dog fighting, with Hope becoming the literal poster dog for the campaign. But the most remarkable thing happened 6 months later. Dr. Martinez brought a dog to the ranch, another bait dog, this one a pit bull so traumatized she wouldn't let anyone near her. "I thought maybe Ethan could try," she said hopefully. Ethan sat outside the dog's kennel for 3 hours, not speaking, just being present. Then, so quietly Margaret almost missed it, he said, "Hope wants to meet you. She says she understands." They brought Hope over, and the two dogs looked at each other for a long moment. Then Hope lay down beside the kennel, pressing her scarred body against the bars. The pit bull, after several minutes, crept forward and lay down too, the two damaged dogs sharing something beyond human understanding. Within a week, the pit bull was letting Ethan pet her. Within a month, she was playing with Miracle. She became the first of many dogs that would come to what became known as Hope's Ranch, a sanctuary for fighting dogs that everyone else had given up on. Ethan grew up surrounded by these broken dogs made whole again. His gift, the ability to understand what animals couldn't say, only grew stronger. By the time he was 10, veterinarians from around the state were bringing him their most difficult cases. But he never forgot that night in the storm when he heard crying from a dumpster. And Hope never forgot the little boy who refused to give up on her. They saved each other in all the ways that mattered. Years later, when Ethan was 15, he was asked to speak at a conference about animal cruelty. He stood at the podium with Hope beside him, older now, gray around her muzzle, but still strong, still proud. "People ask me how I knew Hope needed help that night," he said to the packed auditorium. "The truth is, I didn't just hear her crying. I felt it. I felt her hope slipping away, and I knew that if we didn't find her, a light would go out in the world that could never be rekindled." He looked down at Hope, who gazed back at him with absolute trust and love. "She taught me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that scarred doesn't mean ugly, that fear doesn't mean forever. Every dog that comes to our ranch now, I tell them Hope's story. I tell them about the dog who survived the unsurvivable, who protected her babies against all odds, who chose love over hate even when hate was all she'd known." His voice grew stronger, carrying across the silent room. "But mostly, I tell them about the night a scared German shepherd and a lonely little boy found each other in the rain. Because that's when I learned the most important truth of my life. Sometimes the ones who need rescuing the most are the ones who end up rescuing us." The auditorium erupted in applause, but Ethan only had eyes for Hope. She stood up, slowly but steadily, and licked his hand once. In that simple gesture was everything: gratitude, love, and the unbreakable bond between a boy who listened and a dog who needed to be heard. Vincent Russo was sentenced to 15 years in prison. His entire operation was dismantled, and the warehouse with the red door became a rehabilitation center for rescued fighting dogs. The snake tattoo that had haunted Ethan's dreams became nothing more than a reminder of evil defeated by good. Margaret lived to see Ethan graduate from veterinary school, with Hope still by his side despite her advanced age. The old dog waited until Ethan opened his own practice, specifically for abused and abandoned animals, before she finally let go. She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by Ethan, Margaret, Miracle, and a dozen other dogs she'd helped heal. Her last breath came with the sunrise, golden light filling the room like a benediction. At her memorial service, hundreds of people came. Every family who had adopted one of her puppies. Every dog fighter who'd been prosecuted because of the case she'd helped break. Every animal she'd helped save by inspiring Ethan's gift. But the most touching tribute came from Ethan himself, who stood at her grave with Miracle, now a therapy dog, who visited hospitals to comfort sick children. "You were never just a dog," he said quietly. "You were proof that love is stronger than cruelty, that hope can survive in the darkest places, that sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person willing to answer a cry for help." He placed a small marker on her grave. It read, "Hope, mother, fighter, survivor, teacher, friend." Her love lives on in every life she touched, and it did. Hope's story spread far beyond their small ranch. Laws were changed, fighting rings were exposed, dogs were saved, and somewhere, on rainy nights, other children heard cries from dark places and remembered the boy who wouldn't give up on a dying dog. Because that's what Hope taught them all, that compassion isn't just about saving lives, it's about believing those lives are worth saving, even when the whole world says they're not. Especially then. The ranch still stands today, run by Ethan and supported by donations from around the world. Above the entrance is a sign with Hope's picture and a simple message. Every dog deserves what Hope found, a second chance, a loving family, and someone who hears their silent cries. And in the barn where Hope first recovered, where she gave birth to 6 puppies against all odds, there's a plaque that brings visitors to tears every single day. It says, "In this place, a 5-year-old boy proved that innocence is not weakness, but strength. That love is not foolish, but wise. That hope is not naive, but necessary. And that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can defeat the greatest cruelties." Below it, in a child's handwriting preserved forever, are Ethan's words from that first night. "She's not garbage. She's hope." And she was. She always was. She always will be. Because of a boy who heard her crying in a storm and refused to walk away. Because of a grandmother who chose compassion over convenience. Because of strangers who became family in the fight against cruelty. Because sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. One person saying yes when the world expects no. One child seeing a soul where others see only a broken body. One moment of choosing love over fear. That's Hope's true legacy, not just the puppies who lived, or the fighting ring that fell, or the laws that changed. It's the reminder that inside each of us lives the power to hear the cries others ignore, to see the worth others overlook, to save the lives others abandon. We just have to choose to listen. The way a 5-year-old boy listened one rainy night and changed the world, one rescued dog at a time. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your own rescue stories or where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove love really can conquer all. Together, we can make sure no animal ever suffers in silence again. Because every Hope deserves an Ethan, and every Ethan deserves to know their compassion can change the world.